Thank you very much, Professor Gorello, for your most generous introduction. I am delighted to be here at the Summer University. I had the privilege of being here 6 years ago, and I am overwhelmed by the enthusiasm and the increase in numbers that I see here today. I congratulate Jack Gorello for his wonderful work in this regard. My topic this morning is ethics and entrepreneurship. Everybody knows that the most visible figure in the market economy is the businessman, the entrepreneur. He is the most obvious figure which characterizes the entire system. But in the eyes of the public, and indeed of many intellectuals, the entrepreneur is not an ethically sympathetic or appealing character. The entrepreneur is believed to cheat his customers and his workers. He cheats his customers in terms of price and in terms of quality. So it is believed. He manipulates his customers by skillful advertising, misleading them into buying goods that they do not really need or want. He is believed to ruin the environment ruthlessly, to exploit his employees and make profits from the sweat of their brow. He is believed to engage in collusion with other employers, with other entrepreneurs, to monopolize markets in order to further increase profits at the expense of the consuming public. He is believed to engage in systematic corruption of government officials, in this way undermining the democratic system. And above all, even if one were to find, so the general view runs, even if one were to find a rare entrepreneur who did none of these terrible things, nonetheless the profits that he makes, the entrepreneurial profits that he makes, are totally undeserved. He has not worked for them. He has not given his capital for them, because that is the reward of the capitalist, and we distinguish between the entrepreneur and the capitalist. So that what he makes, the profits that the entrepreneur makes, are without justification. They have no ethical basis through which they can be justified. At best, at very best, what the entrepreneur makes is attributed to pure luck, to good fortune. And there seems to be no good reason why the entrepreneur should be the beneficiary of good fortune rather than the rest of society. So that it is believed that that share of national income which is received by businessmen in their entrepreneurial role has no justification and is consequently ethically to be denounced as taking away that which should belong to the rest of society. Can we be surprised, therefore, if this is the picture of the entrepreneur, and if the entrepreneur is the central figure, the most visible figure in capitalism and the market economy, can we be surprised then that in the public view, the public perception of the market economy is that it is based upon downright immorality? Can we be surprised? I would like to provide a picture this morning which is a little bit different, which would permit us to see the role of the entrepreneur in a different light, and through that we will be able to see that the entire market economy comes into view, becomes visible in a totally different set of ethical colors. I invite you to join with me in exploring this alternative vision. I must, however, preface my remarks by pointing out that in much of modern microeconomics, particularly in its most advanced mathematical form, the entrepreneur does not exist. If one studies general equilibrium theory, one will find that there is no entrepreneur. Markets are fully adjusted, markets clear, no profits are being made, no pure entrepreneurial profits are being made, and if there is someone who is called an entrepreneur, he has no entrepreneurial function to fulfill. In fact, he does nothing which reminds us of the businessman in today's world. So that one might perhaps believe that our concern is misplaced. Our worry about the role of the entrepreneur and the ethical picture, the negative ethical picture which the public has of him, doesn't really matter. Because the market economy, if we wish to understand it in a scientific way, has to be understood as if the entrepreneur, in fact, played no role. From this perspective, the entrepreneur is there in the market, but he doesn't really make any difference. He seems to be there, he seems to be busy, but in fact, what holds the market together is simply a system of interlocking prices which does not depend upon the entrepreneur. And therefore one might say, well, entrepreneurs may be dishonest, entrepreneurs may be unethical, but the market economy is still a good thing. The market economy should not be condemned on the basis of our ethical questioning of the behavior of the entrepreneur. So one might perhaps wish to argue. I must, however, emphasize that for myself and for the school of economic thought with which I identify myself, namely the Austrian tradition, the tradition that began in Vienna 125 years ago approximately, in the work of Karl Menger, I must confess that from the point of view of this tradition, this way out, this defense of the market economy is not available to us, because we understand that the entrepreneur is not simply a figurehead, as it were, in the market economy, but in fact entrepreneurship is the driving force without which none of the advantages of the market economy could be achieved. So one cannot say, well, we will take the advantages, the efficiency advantages, the productivity advantages of the market economy, and not worry about the ethical state of the entrepreneur, we, the Austrian school, are not able to say that. Because for us, the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial role is essential to the functioning of a market economy. A market economy without the entrepreneur is a contradiction in terms for us. And so the problem that we have raised is a serious problem. We cannot brush it away, as we might perhaps wish to brush it away were we general equilibrium theorists. As Austrian school economists, we must confront the ethical question, the ethical dilemma, if the entrepreneur is so important. And if entrepreneurship seems to be surrounded by so many ethical dilemmas, by so many ethical doubts, how can we defend the market economy? My thesis here this morning will be that it is exactly the opposite, exactly the other way around. It is not merely the case that the entrepreneurial role should give us no ethical embarrassment. It is much better than that. Quite the contrary. It is only by fully understanding and recognizing the entrepreneurial role that we can appreciate the full ethical merits of a market economy. It is only by understanding and appreciating what it is that the entrepreneur does that we will be able to appreciate in turn the subtle but profoundly important ethical advantages which a market system can provide a society with, which is not available in any other conceivable social system. Let us consider from an analytical point of view. Let us consider what is the entrepreneurial function. What does he do? This function is, in a way, mysterious. It's mysterious. As we have already mentioned, it is so mysterious that in standard microeconomics, that function has been totally eliminated. It's as if one can do without him. If you study price theory, whether you are studying simple supply and demand analysis along the lines of Alfred Marshall, or you are studying general equilibrium theory along the lines of Leon Walras, or in its more advanced forms along the lines of Arie de Breu, no matter how you study microeconomics, you will discover that the entrepreneur is not there. And the reason why it's not there is because it is difficult to understand what he is needed for. Consider, what is the entrepreneur? The entrepreneur buys and sells. That is the essential function. Pure profit. He buys and sells. He buys at a lower price and sells at a higher price. That is what he's trying to do. Sometimes what he buys is exactly the same item as that which he sells. He buys foreign exchange and he sells foreign exchange. Sometimes he does it so rapidly, the buying and the selling, that we call it simultaneous arbitrage. Sometimes there is a time gap between the moment when he buys something at a lower price and sells it at a somewhat higher price. Sometimes what he buys and sells are physically different. He buys labor services, raw materials, and energy, and sells finished products. Oh, you might say, well, he has contributed something because he has combined these resources. He has taken the flour and the jam and the heat of the oven and produced a pie. Not so. He has produced nothing. He has bought everything he needs to produce. He has hired the services of a chef to put the ingredients together. He has hired somebody to press the button on the oven. He has done nothing. He has hired the person who does the hiring. He has hired the personnel manager. So he does nothing. He simply buys services and sells the product at a higher price. So he himself contributes nothing. Otherwise, he's more than a pure entrepreneur. It is true that in the real world, businessmen are, of course, more than pure entrepreneurs. They do some work themselves. They go to the office and they sit on the telephone. It is true. Sometimes they must shout at their employees. Sometimes they must run around. That is work. But in principle, the work that they do could have been hired. So the pure entrepreneurial role is not the work that they do. Sometimes the entrepreneur contributes his own capital. He invests his own funds in his business. And you may say then that some of the profits that he makes are simply the normal return on his investment. That is true. But that is also not the entrepreneurial role. The entrepreneur, in principle, need have no capital. He could hire all the capital needed, namely he can borrow it. He can borrow from the investor, produce, sell to the customers, pay off the investor, and leave himself with a profit. Pay off the investor plus the investor's interest, and leave himself with pure profit. So that the entrepreneur does nothing except buy and sell. Even as I say, when he buys factors of production services in one particular physical form, and sells their output in a different physical form, nonetheless, from a strictly economic point of view, he is selling that which he is buying. That which he buys is that which he will be selling. Because when one has in front of us the flour and the jam and the sugar and everything and the heat and the oven, everything you need to build the pie, you have the pie. You have it in your grasp. You simply have to say, let there be a pie, and there will be a pie. Because you have in your grasp everything. You have purchased everything you need, everything. All you have to contribute is the pure decision. Let these ingredients become a pie. So that what the entrepreneur does is nothing more than buy and sell. Whether that which he buys and sells is in the same physical form or not makes no difference. The entrepreneur buys and sells. And this is where the mystery of the entrepreneur begins. Why should it be possible? Never mind the moral justification. Why is it economically possible for anyone to win pure profit by selling at a higher price that which he buys at a lower price? It would seem to be impossible. Why should anyone sell at a low price that which he too could sell at the high price? Why should anyone buy at the high price that which she could buy at the low price? And do not answer, but there is a difference, there is a delivery gap, there is a time gap, or whatever. All of those gaps have been taken into account. Everything is in that pile which is being bought. The entrepreneur buys and sells. And the question is, how is it possible economically? Never mind morally, never mind ethically. But how is it economically possible for a gap to exist between the selling price and the buying price? This is the mystery of the entrepreneur. What is his function? Where does it arise from? But of course, this mystery is only at the very surface. If one digs a little bit more deeply, the solution to the mystery becomes immediately apparent.